Hello and welcome to Unfrazzle TV. I'm Emma Leasley, the woman that unfrazzles doctors. And today on the show, I've got Paul Jordan, who runs a program called Winning with Webinars. And he's going to talk to us today about what his area of expertise can help with healthcare. So, for example, a lot of people in healthcare have to do presentations, teach, and I know from speaking to my clients, some people feel really nervous about that. So, welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Emma. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so Paul, do you want to give us a bit of a background and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Okay. Where do I start? So I live in Devon in the UK. From London originally. I've got 3 grown-up young adult children now, and most of my career was spent in IT and technology. So, and a lot of the IT skills transfer very well into kind of the online space because a lot of it's a little bit technical. And in terms of how I got into webinars, is an interesting story as well. I was approached probably about 2 years ago now, the first time. I was approached by a number of different coaches. They say that it's funny in life, sometimes buses come in threes, but I had about 8 different coaches that approached me in the space of 6 months, all of whom wanted to run a webinar because they know that there's a lot of benefit to running a webinar. But there's quite a lot involved. You have to sort of pick the webinar platform, and then you have to set up the registration page, and then you have to do your slides and upload your slides, and there's a lot of other sort of cogs inside the machine, and a lot of people get overwhelmed when they sit down to put a webinar together. They get a bit stuck and give up. So with all those different people wanting to do webinars, I decided to create an online course so that I could teach people how to put the tech together, but also teach them some basic speaking and presentation skills so that they could do a good job. So that's how it came about.
Okay. I know that you've got an interest in mental health as well.
Yeah, very much so. I think mental health has got a bit of a stigma with that label because I think we're improving now in the modern world, but I think to some extent, we could all be said to have mental health. If we've got a healthy mind, then we've got healthy mentality, a healthy mind. I know certainly I've had my own challenges in life when I've been very stressed, quite depressed, and the mind affects the body. We all know that stress can make people ill because we release all these. It's like adrenaline. When we have a fight or flight reflex, we release adrenaline to run away as fast as we can. But when that happens a lot, if we're constantly stressed, obviously all that adrenaline is released into our system in a very toxic way. It's actually very bad for us, and it causes all kinds of health issues, which you probably could tell me more about than I know myself. So I think mental health has got such an important part to play, and whereas it was traditionally very stigmatized, I think there's a much better awareness of it now, and things like self-help, meditation, which is interesting in itself. I've read a very good book by I think it's called Matthew Ricard. He's a priest who does meditation, and now we've got a lot of scientific evidence to scan the brain, monitor the brainwaves during meditation. And it's scientifically and medically proven that meditation helps your immune system. It benefits your health in many ways. So I think on my own journey of hypnotherapy and counseling and stuff, I recognize how important it is to take good care of our minds, which is why I'm quite actively interested in the subject.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's very important. Mental health is just as important as physical health, and they both interact. So yeah, that's a very good point. So thinking about the healthcare professionals then who have to do the presentation, often under a lot of pressure and time restraints too, how would you advise that they stay calm when communicating under pressure?
Well, I can't think of one tip that stands out above all else. I think the best thing I would advise people is to, firstly, if they're going to do a presentation, if time allows, then certainly do a dry run, do a rehearsal. And that can be in front of a camera where you can just record yourself in private and review your own video to see how you perform and see what looks good and what doesn't look so good, so you can actually improve yourself by doing that. I think another thing is when you're doing a presentation, it's very important to stand up, because stand up is good for the voice, it's good for confidence, gives you more energy. So standing up when you're doing a presentation, even if it's on camera, I think that's still a very good thing to do. And learning to breathe. Again, I know it's not meditation, but I think we all know that if we take a deep breath and hold it in and breathe it out in preparation before we actually go live, that helps to kind of calm the nerves down. And I think, so those three things, the rehearsal, standing up, and some good deep breathing exercise beforehand, I think there are three good starting points.
Yeah. And that's really interesting about the standing up. Standing desks are becoming a lot more popular now. And I've not used one myself, I'd love one, but from what people have told me, they feel so much more energetic using them.
Yeah. I've actually got one here. I've got this little set of buttons here, so I can make it go up and down to sort of predetermined heights. I'm sitting down now because we're having a nice relaxed conversation, but certainly if I'm doing a webinar, I'll elevate the desk. But it's also quite nice, if you're doing a lot of desk work, it is actually quite nice to just stand up during the day, not necessarily delivering a webinar, but just to stand up and do a bit of work and sit down, just to give your back a bit of different posturing and not get too set in the chair,
Yeah. And also movement helps beat stress too. Okay. So
you still hear me, Emma?
Yep.
Back. Sorry, we both froze for a moment there. Sorry. I was talking about backs freezing.
What do you think healthcare can learn from webinar psychology?
Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
What do you think healthcare can learn from webinar psychology?
Webinar psychology. Well, in terms of like the psychology of giving a presentation, is that?
Yeah.
I don't know, actually. I suppose, reflecting back on the answers to the previous question, I know we've touched on the idea of stress. Now, public speaking, which webinars kind of are, they can be quite stressful, can't they? Obviously, the biggest difference with a webinar is that if you're in a room with an audience, you can actually see your audience and look around the room, make eye contact with people. But on a lot of webinars, they're blind. All you have is a camera, and you can't necessarily see the audience. Now, people use Zoom occasionally, but even with Zoom, a lot of people will have their camera switched off. So in terms of the psychology of like trying to prepare yourself and avoid stress, I think, as I say, the breathing is a good thing to do, and the preparation, and having a good set of slides to support what you're saying as well, because then you're not totally relying on your own spoken words. If you've got some images to support what you're saying, rather than just having lots of text, I think that can be a big help. But I'm not sure if that's properly answers your question, because I'm not quite sure I understood it properly, to be honest.
Right, okay, that's fine. So yeah, it was mainly like thinking about how much the way that you'd prepare for a webinar would help you in other areas.
Okay. Well, I suppose in terms of communication, I mean, again, that huge subject of human communication, I think learning body language is important. And again, I've read that it's very important to show our hands when we're doing a presentation online, because in the real world, people can see our hands. And if we look at the history of where the handshake came from, it was to prove that we weren't holding a weapon. And I think apparently that in our deep psyche, over many centuries, we've still inherited that belief that if we can't see someone's hands, they're suspicious. So even if we're in front of a camera, it's good to show our hands. But learning to communicate and project your voice and making good eye contact with the camera, I think those skills transfer very well to the real world, because those are the sorts of things that we do when we're with another human being. But I suppose if we're having a conversation rather than delivering a presentation, we're actually doing a lot more proactive listening to somebody and acknowledging what they're saying, doing some positive listening and reiterating back. Whereas a presentation, it can be a bit interactive, but it tends to be more delivery than it is listening.
Yeah. Yeah, and from what you were saying about the difference between in person and online, I know that that's something that I struggle with online because you're not getting that feedback from people.
Yeah,
So, for example, if you're doing a presentation in front of people and people start nodding off you, then know that you've got to like hurry things along a little bit and maybe move on to something else. But especially with, I mean, I understand why people turn the cameras off. Sometimes it's you've been at work all day or you've got other things going on and you want to keep the camera off or you're not feeling very well. But when you've just got rows of initials or still pictures, it can be a bit disconcerting because
yeah,
even if you're talking to a group of people and someone like smiles and nods, you know they understand it and you know that they're enjoying the experience. But if you're not getting that feedback, it can be a little bit, how is this landing?
yeah. No, that's an extremely good point, and I'm glad you've raised it, because I think another thing that I've seen in webinars is that people, they do a lot of talking, but it's really important to constantly, well, not constantly, but to ask questions,
Mm.
not only rhetorical questions, but actually to check in with the audience. And sometimes it's good to ask a question early on that you know that people are going to say yes to. So when you first, because I think, when you first start the presentation, those first 3 seconds, you can immediately capture the audience's interest by throwing them a question. And if it's a question you know they're going to say yes to, they can either, if it's a real audience, they'll put their hand, you can get them to put their hand up. Or if it's a webinar, you can get them to type yes in the chat box. So you've immediately kind of given them something to do rather than them just sitting back and not having to do anything. And I think throughout the webinar, it's good to have some really well thought out questions that are simple to understand, so there's no ambiguity in the person's mind to say what do they mean. But if you can get people to put yes or no in the chat at various points, you're kind of re-engaging them and keeping them involved rather than just sitting there and, like you said, we've all been to those webinars where it's like, because they're boring. Interaction.
Yeah, and I think it's a very different skill being in front of a group of people face to face to doing a webinar.
I'd agree. It's because, as you say, first you've got the feedback because you can scan around your audience and gauge how it's landing, which you can't necessarily do in a webinar. And you can fine tune your delivery. I mean, you may have a preset agenda in terms of what you're going to say, but you can probably tweak it and tailor it according to the feedback from the audience. And there might be a little bit of interaction to explain or talk about some of those things. And you might expand on some things in front of one audience, but expand on different things in front of a different audience. Even though you've got the same kind of agenda, you might find some audiences are more interested in some things than others. So I think, providing everyone's prepared well on their subject and they've done a bit of practice and a bit of rehearsal, and they've left space for questions, because questions are great, but if you've got a certain amount of time and a certain amount of content to get through, if you're trying to answer questions in real time, it can really take you off the rails, and then you might spend 5 minutes answering a question, and it's quite difficult to go back to the exact point of where you left off to go back to the main theme. So they can be quite, it's quite hard to handle them well. I know people have a Q&A session, or a Q&A bit at the end, whereas on a webinar it's good because people can put their questions in the chat, and even if you don't answer them in real time there and then, they'll still be there so that you can email that person after the webinar's finished. Whereas in an audience, it's a spoken question, unless you've got someone to help and who's taking note of the question to support you, it's quite hard to manage all that and keep your content on track.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so a lot of people worry about, well, they have a fear of being in front of people, being on show. And I was speaking to a friend who works at a university, and we've both really noticed, I know from when I was teaching in a college, we've both noticed that over the past couple of decades, that people at university level, university age, are getting a lot more anxious around standing up and giving presentations. I don't know if that's because they stopped doing that at school or what the issue is there. But I am noticing that a lot of people, like, because I know that I've got med students in the audience who may relate to this, that there is that real fear of doing presentations and being in front of people. Have you got any tips on how to reduce that fear of being on show?
I suppose it's got a few things, because I've been there myself. I know what it's like. I mean, back in my corporate days, I've stood in front of small, audiences of 50 to 100 people, and I hated it. And it was like, lots of government officials, you suit and tie, and feeling very nervous, very dry, dull presentations, which I didn't enjoy. And I didn't have any training then. I didn't have any coaching. I just used to sort of fumble through. And now I remember a couple of years, probably about 3 years ago, I remember when I did my first live webinar, and I was nervous as hell. It went terribly bad. It was a real disaster. And everything that could go wrong went wrong because I hadn't rehearsed it and I was still learning about it. And I sort of did a few more, and I started. Someone suggested, "Well, Paul, have you done a dry run?" I said, "No, what's that?" And then I educated myself. I got to the point where I was looking at the camera on top of my screen, and I was doing a practice run on my own, and I just burst into laughter. I thought, here I am, this little bit of plastic on top of my computer is making me nervous. How ridiculous is that? Because I was as nervous when I was on my own as to whether there was an audience there. So I think repetition, it's like anything. When we repeat things, we get better. I think if it's something that's going to be done regularly, it's worth just picking up a book and, again, standing up and reading out from a book. And I would suggest the book is not related to the subject of the presentation, because then your mind's distracted about the subject. Just pick up a novel or a magazine and just practice reading out loud, because that gets your voice good. It loosens your vocal cords, and then you get used to your own voice. Because I find one of the things that is quite funny, and this was, again, it was true of me, is that when we're on our own, if we stand up in a room and we speak out loud, it's actually a very alien experience, because we've never done that before. Why would we stand up in a room and speak out loud on our own? It's just like, oh, but it's uncomfortable, isn't it? And why is that? Because are we afraid of our own voice? And I think we are sometimes. So I think practicing even on your own, reading out loud, I think that's a really good thing, because it just gives you the confidence to speak out loud and articulate your voice and try different things and shout and scream and laugh and do all the silly things when there's nobody looking and it's only you to judge yourself. So I think we have to get over ourselves first before we can then get over the fear of an audience. Because if we can have a laugh on our own and be free to mess around, I think that's a big step forward. So practice, have a laugh, and it just gets easier with experience.
Yeah, so that rehearsal. Obviously, the first time you do any kind of new thing, at first it takes a lot of effort because it's new to you, and then the more you do it, the easier it gets. How have you got any tips for building confidence in people that really don't have a lot of confidence?
I think so. I spoke about standing in front of a camera, but also standing in front of a mirror and talking to ourselves. Now, this goes quite deep psychologically, because I've met a lot of people that are camera shy, and it's like a lot of things in life. Even though our conscious mind knows that it's totally irrational and it seems a bit silly, it's our subconscious mind that's holding us back. Another thing is that I find that this is kind of going off a bit of a tangent here, but some people watch their own videos and they don't like it. It makes them squirm. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I think the first one is that many of us don't like the sound of our own voice. When we hear our own voice recorded, we sound very different because we hear our own voice through our jawbone. So when we hear our voice through our ears, we sound different. But the other interesting thing about video is that when we watch ourselves on camera live, so like I'm looking at my screen now as you are, and when we stand in front of the mirror, the face we see in the mirror is the one that we see every day for a long time. We might see ourselves in the mirror thousands of times. When we see our video being played back, the image is flipped. So although that our rational minds know that it's ourselves on the video, our subconscious mind is a little bit confused because there's something wrong. That image is not who I recognize. I know it's me, but it's not right because your face is the other way around. But again, that's something you can get used to when you watch your own videos. But in terms of building self-confidence, certainly repetition, practice, repetition, standing up, speaking out loud, having a laugh, and just getting over one's own fear of one's own voice, I think, initially, because once we've done that on our own, it's easier to then walk onto a stage or be in front of a camera. But also psychologically, from people that I've spoken to, it can run very deep to kind of even things at childhood and things at school, bullying. There's loads of things in our past that can interfere with our current day behaviors. And I know I've got one of my clients who actually coaches people on how to overcome camera shyness, and she's done some amazing work. I've seen people go from absolutely nervous wrecks to confident presenters after just one session, hypnotherapy kind of. So.
Yeah, hypnotherapy is really good. I know I always get self-conscious about my accent because I've got a northern accent, and I don't know if it's changed any, because when I grew up and went through school, we got told off for the way that we talked, which was bizarre. It was like, oh, we don't say Murray, we say Mary, and all of that. So there was that kind of thing going on. And plus, when I went to college, one of the modules I did was radio, and I got told that I had a voice that wasn't suitable for radio because of my accent.
Oh, that's sad.
And I mean, like, now you've got Sarah Cox, and like there's loads of us Northerners on telly and things now. But I know that that's something that's always like bothered me. But I mean, it doesn't really anymore, because I'd rather be authentic than putting an accent on.
I love your accent. I think it's great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But I think we can have those hang-ups, and I've been speaking to a lot of people from abroad, and I always get told, like, by Americans that I've got a really nice accent, and an Irish person told me I had a lovely accent, which I was quite shocked about. It's like, no, you've got a lovely accent. I'm not.
You do.
I don't think all of these hang-ups that we have, I don't think anybody else really notices.
I agree, but it's interesting what you say about school teachers, because I've read so many stories in different scenarios how children have been told by teachers, you'll never be a success, or you're really bad at that. I mean, there are some wonderful teachers out there who are loving and caring, but my God, some dreadful teachers who planted really toxic seeds in young people. That's really, they've grown up with these seeds growing in a really unhealthy way, which is tragic. So some teachers are really thoughtless, and the things that they say, they don't realize the psychological damage they're doing. It's appalling.
Yeah.
I think, all these different accents, they're wonderful. They're part of people's character. It's part of their personality. You've been told by the American person what a lovely accent you have, and I agree. I think accent, I could tell you a little story actually. When I was about 13, I used to work in a builder's merchant. It was a family-run business, and we used to sell plumbing fittings, paint, mortar, plaster, gutter, everything, different types of screws. I remember this Irish guy came in once and came up to the counter, and I was standing there in my kind of whites. It's like a lab coat we used to wear, which is a bit crazy, but it was a white jacket. And they said, sorry, sir, what was that? No, I've been here. No, 3 doors and and I didn't have a clue what this guy was saying. I just had no clue. And when I came to the third time to ask him again, because I was quite a shy young guy, I was only 13, and he was getting quite frustrated. And my manager came over and said, Paul, it's all right, I'll take care of this guy. And he just gently took me to one side because he knew this guy,
Mm.
but his accent was so strong. I just did not have a clue what he was talking about. It was just, I was getting quite anxious to say the least. But now all these different accents people have, they're just brilliant. I think it's part of the colour of the UK, isn't it? That we have all these different dialects and accents. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not like I'm sort of doing webinars and YouTube live saying things like, "Oh, we buy gum" and all of that stuff. It's just the way that I talk. So yeah, I think we need to celebrate our own uniqueness, I think.
Definitely. I've been quite fortunate. I've worked in different parts of the country, and I spent quite a long time working in the Shetland Isles, would you believe? And that was a really interesting accent. It was kind of a mix between Scandinavian and Scottish. It was a really very peculiar accent. But I find that, and it's human nature, I think, that when, as an individual, if we're kind of put into a community that speaks in a different accent, you pick it up. It's part of our being accepted and part of becoming part of the clan. We just naturally start to take on their accent, and it's just really weird, because when I used to fly back to the UK, I'd be speaking Shetlandese, and people used to think, "Paul, where have you been?" But it's just part of what we do.
Yeah, and it's the mirror neurons, as you say, to help us be accepted and welcomed into the group. I know that I was temporarily a Brummie when I lived there, and my mum was mortified because I came back with the Brummie accent.
Wonderful.
But yeah, I do have that habit of, if I'm talking to, say, somebody from Liverpool, slip into a Scouse accent because it's just up the road from where I am. And I've kind of encountered a lot of people from Liverpool, so that's another thing that I do. And I always think at the back of my mind, I hope people don't think I'm like taking the mickey. And it's interesting that we do that, because I've worked in different locations. I've worked in North Wales and Bolton, Warrington, and each time when I've been working in those places, I've adopted the accent of where I've been working.
It just happens subliminally, doesn't it? You kind of don't consciously do it. It just happens.
Yeah.
And it's, as you say, it's obviously some part of our clever brain that's helping us to be accepted into that group of people, because when we're accepted, we can communicate better. We just get more out of people when we're part of their tribe, so to speak.
Yeah. And it's safety in numbers as well, because we're still wired up as if we've got predators.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. It's kind of, I read some interesting stories about, I think I read one a while ago, actually. Do you remember there's a politician called Jeffrey Archer? I think he's still alive.
Yeah.
And he's written a lot of books, but he's done time in prison, and he's quite well spoken. And I was reading about how, when he went to prison, you can imagine there's a lot of quite interesting characters in prison that don't speak posh. And he did. And I think it was quite hard for him to become accepted by his fellow inmates because he was so high society. But he did, he overcame that. And he was actually quite well regarded. I think he did some teaching and he helped them. But I think he recognized himself that speaking with a very, sort of very high level accent is it can alienate people. It can really kind of make it difficult to relate to them.
Yeah. It kind of works both ways then in that sense.
I think it very much does. It's because, and you can see why people can become alienated, because it's like, an accent can project, not so much an accent, a well-spoken English voice can kind of project an image of wealth or superiority or whatever. I think those days are slightly faded now. I mean, if I look at some of the documentaries I've watched on TV, there's been a really lovely variety of people with very strong East London accents, and then you find out it's like Professor so-and-so of neurology, and it's like their accent betrays their education, which is good, because I love that sort of shake-up, because people have an expectation when they hear someone speaking or they look at them, we judge the book by its cover or by how we hear the book. But when you actually find out what a clever person they are, it kind of totally tips your ideas on its head, and I love it when that happens.
So are we finally getting rid of the generic student accent?
The generic student accent, what's that then?
It's a phenomenon that me and a few friends discovered going to universities at different locations around the country.
Okay.
And it's when people are at university, the regional accents seem to go out the window and they start talking in this generic student accent.
Right.
And everything's really random.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I suppose a university is a great collection of multi-cultures, because you see so many. I mean, I look back, it's quite a long time ago when I did my degree, but even then, I remember on my course we had some Chinese guys, some guys from Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure if it was Dubai then, probably was Qatar. We had some Welsh people on the course. So just the variety of all of those nationalities in one room, seeing each other on a regular basis, you get a real mix, which is quite fun, isn't it? It's a real mix-up. I think also some of the colloquialisms, some of the little phrases that were around that aren't around now. There's still a lot of other modern phrases, aren't there? Like "What's up?" When the American is "What's up?" rather than saying "Hello," they say "What's up," which drives me nuts because I think it's really irritating. But it's all part of the fun.
Okay, so do you think there are any myths out there about presenting?
Myths. I suppose some people would say they are difficult to do, but everything's difficult until it's easy, because again, people practice and rehearse. Other myths. I don't know. Nothing springs to mind really. Just racking the brains as hard as I can. Other myths about presenting. I suppose. So go on.
I was going to say, what are your thoughts on fake it till you make it?
Why not?
Some people really agree with it, and some people say, no, don't do that.
Well, it's almost like a contradictory phrase, isn't it? Because back earlier on, we had a conversation about, I think before we came on the webinar, this podcast this evening, we were talking about newly qualified doctors being thrown in the deep end and getting really stressed and struggling to find their feet. And I think anybody in any role, when we're first doing something, whatever that one thing is, we are kind of faking it because we don't have the experience to do that thing to the best of our ability yet.
Yeah.
And no matter how many, we could have the best qualification, the highest pass rate on the planet, but it's only through experience that we get really good at doing something. And the experience is like repetition and looking at how we do things. If you look at like young children, when they learn to walk, and I love this one, they'll fall over and they'll fall over again and they'll fall over again and they'll fall over again. So they're not faking walking, but they're trying very hard, and eventually they do walk. So I think with anything that we do, when we're doing it for the first time or the second time or the third time, if we're teaching or if we're coaching, then one label could be that we're faking it, which I think is a bit unfair. But there'll come a point after several iterations of whatever it is we're doing, then we become really damn good at it.
Yeah.
So I think faking it till we make it, I think, maybe not the nicest label to use, but I think that's inherently the case with everything, isn't it? Because you do something for the first time and it's not going to be the best time that you do that, but you're going to get better and better. So that's what I'd say.
Okay. What about that thing of, if you're nervous, picture the audience in their underwear?
Yeah.
Your experience.
I've never tried that one, I have to say. I don't know. I think it depends on the situation as well. I mean, I've been in some rooms, this is going back many years, when there's been like an overhead projector. Remember the days of the overhead projector, which are long gone now, but the room is darkened, so you've got this bright light projecting onto a screen behind you, and the audience, you can't really see them. They're there, and you can see the shadows, but you can't see the faces because the light's down low, and you can almost like forget that they're there. But in other scenarios, the lights are up and you can look around the audience. And a good thing to do is to actually speak to an individual in the audience, rather than, I think the mistake that some people make is they're looking around the room trying to sort of spread their delivery, but you're not actually making eye contact with anybody. But a good thing to do is to make eye contact with one person, speak a sentence, start your next sentence by looking at somebody else in the eye, pick someone else, and then start your next sentence. But of course, that's really hard to do if you've not done it before. But you can practice. You know, if people want to do a really good job, one of the courses I went on for public speaking, the guy actually gave us a set of faces to print out, and you stick them on the wall with blue tack, all these different faces, about 10 different faces. He says, just practice, just look at one face, say a sentence, make eye contact with the next face, speak your next sentence, rather than just sort of looking randomly around the room and not actually making eye contact with anybody. Because when you do that, when you're making eye contact, I think you're getting a little bit of rapport, and it can actually reduce your nerves because you're actually just speaking to the one person in that moment rather than trying to speak to everybody. You're just speaking to one, you're having a conversation with one person almost. So it's good to do, but it takes conscious effort and a bit of practice beforehand to master that.
Yeah, when I did my teacher training, it was like, share your eye contact fairly. Don't just focus on the same people.
Good advice.
Everybody, yeah.
It makes people feel involved as well, doesn't it? Because they're actually part of the presentation. If you've made eye contact with everybody in the room, depending, you know, if you've got 1,000 people, that's going to be quite tricky. But if you've got 50 people, then it's probably fairly possible, isn't it?
Yeah, and I suppose that's a difficult one with the webinar, because even if you've got people's faces on the screen, nobody can tell that you're looking at them.
Absolutely.
And
in fact, this is which is actually a good thing, because on a webinar, if you're just looking at the camera, that you're making eye contact with everybody at the same time. And good advice for a webinar or an online presentation is that you just address the audience. You're just talking to one person. You're only having a conversation or a presentation to one person, although everybody can see it and hear it. If you just think in terms of one person, and also, you know, it depends on the nature of the presentation, but it's also in a webinar, you can actually speak to one person. So you can always say you, not everyone or someone, but you can say you, because that you lands with each person individually, because they're not sitting next to each other. It would appear that you're just speaking to that one person. In an audience in a room, you can't do that, of course, because you can't single people out and you can speak to them with eye contact, but you can't just say you, because there's lots of other people there. But you can do that on a webinar. You can just say you.
Okay. How do you think clinicians can use simple communication tools to feel more in control when they're having a normal conversation?
I suppose positive listening is a good one, isn't it? So we listen to what someone says, and then we reiterate back using their own words to acknowledge and confirm that we've heard them correctly. And that also that gives that person the knowledge that they've been understood. Because being understood, we all like to speak, but we like to be understood when we speak. So reiterating back to them what they've said is a good thing, and asking questions to qualify what they've said is a good thing. And I think we've all seen the nodding head, which someone's talking, we can kind of nod in agreement subliminally. And again, it shows that they're being acknowledged. And I recently read a book, which I'm still halfway through, and it's about, I think it's called Clean Language. And it's very much about that. It's very much about using the same words that people speak when you're echoing back to them what they've said. If you actually use the exact same words, it helps to draw out of that person the knowledge that they want to convey. I think we've all seen the conversations where people listen to respond. They're just waiting for a gap so they can say their bit, but they're not really hearing what the other person's saying. So I think we've got to really spend time not just waiting for a gap in a conversation so we can speak our bit, but to actually really listen to that other person and really absorb what they're saying.
Yeah, definitely. And it's that active listening where you're focusing on listening rather than responding. So you're actually fully listening to what they're saying rather than thinking, oh, what do I say next?
Yeah, I think it's very powerful. It's because I find human communication is so interesting. I find I've watched so many just dramas and movies and documentaries, and you hear two people having a conversation, and the communication is so bad because one person will ask a question, and the recipient will twist that round into an accusation. And someone's just asked a question that what do you mean? Da, da, da. Well, no, I've just asked a question, but they'll twist it according to what's going on in their own mind.
Yeah.
And that's a real frustration. I think in relationships, this all becomes very important. And I think even if there's a prickly situation, even if the other person even if they're wrong, sometimes people just need to get things off their chest to kind of calm down and then get to the actual proper conversation. Which means sometimes you have to just listen and accept that they're speaking rubbish and not try and correct them, because it just fans the flames. But if people kind of get stuff off their chest, and then you can listen, quite often the person will find, they'll often apologize for flaring up or being angry. They'll find fault with their own delivery. But if we immediately kind of defend or try and correct that person, it won't work. It's like, I always find it, I'm not a fan of these police programs where they show you like the police breaking down a door and arresting somebody, and the guy's getting really angry and they're saying, calm down. The last thing you want to tell someone when they're angry is tell them to calm down. What does that do? I'm not angry. It's the most stupid thing to do. People just need time to kind of let their emotions, because we're all chemicals in here, we have to let the chemicals kind of dissipate, and they'll calm down through their own accord. But if you're telling them to calm down, it doesn't work, does it? But they do it timely.
When in human history has it ever worked telling somebody who's not calm to calm down? It hasn't.
Exactly. Why do some people still insist on doing it? Because it's just not. It must be really bad police training. I'm sure there's better ways that they could be taught how to deal with things.
Yeah, I always kind of put it as, if they've gone limbic, then you're not going to be able to give them any information or get answers. So it's good for them to calm down. So if somebody's anxious, which can come out as anger as well, so that person could be anxious, that's why they're being angry. If someone's angry, then you can't give them any more information at that time. They're not going to take it in. The frontal lobes aren't working properly. So it's just, people need to calm down beforehand. And I think that's an issue that people, especially with GPs, because the appointments are so short, is to be able to give people that time to get to the point where people are able to talk and actually say what they need to say rather than being reactive. Yeah,
because I can imagine. I mean, I've had hypnotherapy and counselling and stuff, and usually the first part of any session, I know it's not the same as going to see a GP, but I think there's some parallels here. The first part of the appointment is a bit of rapport building and a bit of trust building. Oh, Paul, hi, how are you? How have you been today? And it's just to kind of let someone relax, get into the scene, not just walk through the door and say, hello, Mr. Jordan, what's wrong with you today? I hear you've got a bad foot, or I hear you've got a headache. You've got to build the trust, and then people relax. And when they relax, they're more likely to open up and speak what's really going on. And GPs, I imagine, have to do that little bit of trust and rapport building at the beginning of the appointment. If it's someone they've never met before, they feel it might be, especially if it's a very personal thing, people are going to be very uncomfortable to walk up to a complete stranger they've never met before and tell them something that they're really embarrassed about. Maybe they've got hemorrhoids or whatever it is. Yeah. Whereas a couple of that it only probably takes 60 seconds, 2 minutes to build a bit of trust, build a bit of rapport, make that person feel comfortable, put them at ease. And they're going to be much more likely to tell you accurately what's going on, I'd imagine.
Yeah. And I know from being a patient that there are some GPs who have got it down to an art form, that they make you feel comfortable from the minute that you walk in the room. They don't. I mean, even just like a nice, normal, short greeting, you already feel comfortable. So yeah, I think it's doable, but yeah.
Well, my ex-partner was a nurse. I was always hearing stories about doctors that had such awful bedside manner with people, had no empathy, just no human communication skills. It's all very sterile, very factual. People that have got really bad illnesses or terminal illnesses, and some of these doctors, even the kind of mature doctors, although technically they were good surgeons or whatever it is they would do, they had really blunt. They were very blunt, almost kind of autistically blunt with people, showing no empathy whatsoever. And it seems to be that I've heard of that quite a lot. I don't know if you've come across that in medicine.
I mean, pretty much all the doctors I've seen have been lovely. I mean, obviously there's been some exceptions, and I'm not going to say that every single doctor has got really good people skills, but I've kind of been really lucky and had really empathetic doctors. Maybe a couple weren't so much, but I think, I mean, neurodivergence is a likeliness too, and that could be a reason. But also, if you've got a doctor that's burnt out, then having that, being able to empathise and have that care can be difficult too.
I bet.
So I suppose it's different in whatever situation that you're in. I mean, I've also been lucky to have worked with really nice doctors. I don't think I've ever worked with a doctor who hasn't been really nice and friendly.
Okay.
Obviously, sometimes we all snap when we're stressed. But yeah, no. I suppose it's different in a hospital too, because it's a different kind of pressure.
Yeah. I can only imagine how hard it must be, because we all know that the pressure and the limited time that people have to see their patients, and sometimes there just isn't the luxury to have that little bit of rapport time that they really need. It's like they've probably got so many patients to see in a day, and yeah, it's just such a conflicting challenge to be able to do everything as well as people would like to be able to do it. But that's just the way things are at the moment, sadly, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's the staff shortages at the moment aren't helping.
No.
Everyone's
Sure.
everyone's just stretched, and yeah, if you stretch something too far, there's the risk of it breaking. So
absolutely. I mean, just going, I know it's jumping around here, but I suppose the other, going back to webinars, the other thing that can help people save time is once they, depending on what webinar platform they use, once they've delivered that webinar, it gets recorded. So if it's something they have to deliver to multiple audiences, once they've done it live, they can then just give it for other people to watch in their own time, if it's like an educational kind of thing. So that's worth keeping in mind, because that can save a lot of time and effort. To go around, deliver the same presentation multiple times in multiple rooms, you do it once, get it right, and then it's recorded for other people to sit down and watch in their own leisure time.
And I think with healthcare, you've got to have that flexibility as well. Finding a time when multiple people can sit in a room is very difficult.
Well, exactly. Another thing about, even with the recorded webinar, even if, so the presenter is obviously not going to be necessarily there, but with a recorded webinar, the presenter can actually sit in the background, although he's not going to be on camera. The video recording is being played. But if the presenter wants to sit in the background, he can still answer questions that are coming in on the web chat in real time. And if he's not there, or she's not there, the presenter's not there, and people raise questions in the recording, those questions get turned into an email. So although they don't get answered in real time, the presenter can still pick up those questions perhaps the next morning. So for example, if you'd asked a question about XYZ and it didn't get answered there and then, next morning that person will receive the email with that question. They can just reply, "Oh, hi Emma, you raised a question about XYZ in the webinar yesterday. Sorry I couldn't reply to you in real time because I was busy doing the presentation. However, here's the answer." And then you can have the email back and forth, which is really good. And it means that nothing falls through the cracks. Everybody gets their questions answered. And again, in a live presentation, that may not always be the case. And even if you do answer things verbally, it quite often gets evaporated away into the ether. People, "Oh, what did that guy say again?" But with the webinar stuff and an email, people can go back and refer to the written correspondence, which is quite useful to have.
Yeah, that's useful. So we've covered quite a lot. We've looked at different ways of building confidence, especially for doctors or other healthcare professionals that might have anxiety around presentations and things like that. We've also looked at how those skills can be generalized to other conversations. Is there any gem or nugget of advice that you'd give?
I'm glad you asked, because in that last couple of sentences there is something I was yearning to say. And it's this, that with a lot of things in life, and presentations being one of them, it's very easy for us to feel not so much isolated, but we assume that, oh my God, I'm so worried about this presentation, I feel so anxious. But hey, I can promise you, everybody has that feeling. Everybody feels anxious. And I found in my own career, when I started to read about other people's experiences, I thought, oh, so it's not just me. And that's very comforting, because when you realize that the anxiety and the lack of confidence, it's not just you or me, because everybody has that. It's just that pain barrier that getting out of your comfort zone. It's just pushing through that, because I think it's very easy to it's our nature generally to kind of blame ourselves or think we're bad or think we're not very good or whatever. But when you look around and read about other people's experiences, it's the same for everybody. And that brings huge comfort for me anyway, because I think, oh, it's not Paul Jordan who's bad at webinars. It's everybody struggles with it the first time. Oh, I feel much better now because it's not just me,
Yeah, I think one thing I hear from a lot of people is, I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, I should have my shit together. When in reality, nobody has the stuff together at all times. It's a myth. We all kind of go around pretending that we're all doing okay and we know what we're doing and everything's fine. But in reality, that's not the case. Everybody struggles. And I think if we were a bit more honest about that, people would be feeling more comfortable.
I totally agree. Because it's another attribute that brings us together, because we've got those things in common. And when we identify, when we hear someone say, "Oh, I was really feeling unconfident when I did my webinar the other day." "Oh, did you? That's how I felt." There's that immediate recognition, and we feel part of not being alone.
Yeah.
But it's interesting as well when you read about a lot of famous actors that go on stage or go on the camera set. There are still some quite famous people. I was surprised that even they get so nervous, even though they've done it 1,000 times, they actually vomit before they go on stage. It's actually a thing. They get so nervous that they actually vomit every time, which is horrible. But the thing about anxiety, of course, is that, and a bit of nerves, a little bit of nerves can be quite good because it keeps us sharp, it keeps us on our toes. If we had no nerves at all and we were kind of quite relaxed, we might go on, and because we're so relaxed, we just don't do a very good job. So a little bit of fear and a little bit of anxiety, and I say a little bit, providing it's not overwhelming, a little bit can just be quite a healthy thing. A little bit of stress just keeps us on our toes, keeps us sharp, so it doesn't overwhelm us. But yeah, we're just human beings, and that's flight or fight, isn't it? Public speaking is one of I think it's one of the most. I think people would say it's even more scary than death. It's hard to believe, but it's I think it's one of the biggest feared things, isn't it? Public speaking. So.
And it is. It does get easier, as you say. I mean, I remember the first time I stood up and taught a class. I was really, really nervous, and now I find smaller groups make me nervous sometimes. I prefer talking to bigger groups. I don't know why that is.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's also, and this can be true of a lot of things in life as well. It can be if you're presenting to say 6 people that all of whom that knew you, or that knew me, I would find that more uncomfortable than delivering a presentation to 6 strangers.
Yeah, definitely.
Because when you know people, when you're doing a presentation, your voice does change. You put on a different voice, you speak differently. But you're always conscious that if you're speaking in front of people that you know, that you realise they're seeing a different personality to you or a different side to you. And because you know that, it just feels very uncomfortable. But if they're complete strangers, they don't know you any different. So I think it's easier to do. Okie
doke. So if any of our viewers want to get a bit more information about how to create webinars, presentations, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, first way is if they do a quick Google and look for Paul Jordan webinars, you'll see that I come up on page 1 of Google in a few places. But if they want to email me, it's Paul, Paul, at ldm.expert, ldm.expert. But hopefully we can put that in the description down below here somewhere. But I'll be delighted to speak to anybody, completely free, no obligation. I'd just like to help people.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show today. It's been great having you when we've talked about a variety of subjects. I think we've gone off on various tangents, but hey ho.
Well, thank you for having me. And I do talk too much, so I apologise for that, but it's been a pleasure to be here. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, brilliant. I talk too much too, so don't worry there. Okay, so next week I'll be back, and we do have Dr. Ranj Sagoo next week. The past couple of episodes I've been saying that, next week we've got Ranj Sagoo because I've misread my spreadsheet. But anyway, he is actually coming on next week. He's had the biggest kind of bigging up of any of my guests. He's a GP, he's a hypnotherapist and coach. He's going to be talking about the work that he does and also how he uses art to help manage stress and his mental health. He is a very, very good artist. He does photorealistic stuff. It is absolutely amazing, and he's going to show us some of his work. So I'm really looking forward to it. So I'll see everybody next week.